It was supposed to be a peaceful Friday, the kind of morning where the lake's surface was perfectly still, and the only sound was the gentle hum of the wind through the pines. I'd just brewed my coffee in the old percolator, the aroma drifting, out onto the porch where I sat in my favorite rocking chair. From where I leaned back, I could see the water shimmer in the sunlight, the perfect scene I'd come here for every spring. This cabin had been my grandfather's, passed down with a simple note: keep it peaceful. That's what I'd done until today. I was just about to take my first sip when a gravel crunch interrupted the silence. I turned. There she was, Karen, stomping down the path, clutching a clipboard like it was a weapon, her baby blue tracksuit and massive sunglasses making her look like she was heading to court or tennis or both. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask who I was. Instead, she pointed at the cabin and barked, "This structure is on HOA managed land, and you are not authorized to be here." Her voice was loud, demanding. I blinked. I hadn't moved my coffee from my lips. She kept talking, waving her clipboard like a sacred scroll, claiming the HOA had recently reviewed land parcels and decided this cabin was in their jurisdiction. I kept quiet. Silence is sometimes the best reply. She looked offended that I wasn't reacting, so she whipped out her phone with a dramatic flick and started dialing. "Sign Webon," she yelled into the phone, her voice rising as she shouted into the receiver. "Yes, I'm reporting a squatter in the HOA's community cabin. Address is..." I leaned back, watching her scream into the phone, standing on land she didn't own. The irony hit me. She had no idea I owned the entire shoreline behind her. The land beneath her high heels, the water she admired. Mine. I wanted to laugh, but I just smiled and let the show continue. Minutes later, the sheriff's SUV rolled up the drive. Deputy Mills, a familiar face, stepped out. I knew him from around the lake. He fished here, waved at me sometimes. Karen's eyes lit up like she'd scored a victory. She waved her clipboard again, pointing at me as if I was a criminal. "Ma'am," Mills said, eyeing her. "How long's he been here?" She snapped. "Long enough to build that structure." She pointed at the cabin like it was a trespasser herself. Mills looked at me, then at the cabin. Calmly, he asked, "Do you have proof of ownership?" I got up, went inside, and returned with a thick envelope of deeds and maps, the original documents signed and stamped. I handed them to him. Mills flipped through quietly, studying every page. After a moment, he handed them back and said, "Everything appears in order." Karen's jaw clenched. She stammered, "But our records say it's HOA land. You're violating rules." Mills looked at her unimpressed. "Maintaining isn't the same as owning," he said simply. Her face turned red, and she threatened to escalate, promising legal action and calling the HOA board. I just nodded politely, "Thank you for stopping by," and offered Mills some coffee. As he walked to his cruiser, he looked over his shoulder and said with a chuckle, "Good luck with your board meeting." He drove off, leaving Karen standing there, fuming. She nearly twisted her ankle rushing back to her car, then sped away in a cloud of perfume and entitlement. I didn't say a word. I just sipped my coffee, watching the lake's shimmering water and the peaceful morning. But beneath that calm, something was stirring. I knew this was just the beginning. Karen's storm was coming, and I was ready. Would you like me to continue with the next chapter? Absolutely. Here's the second chapter, starting immediately from where the first left off, plunging into the action with suspense, simple language, and powerful twists. I watched her scramble into her car, nearly tripping over a root in a rush. The engine roared and she sped off, leaving a trail of dust and perfume behind her. I didn't move, just sat back calmly sipping my coffee, pretending I hadn't seen the chaos she'd just unleashed. But I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Suddenly my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen, Deputy Mills. I answered quietly, voice steady. "Did she leave?" I asked. "Yeah," Mills said. "But she's already filed a formal complaint. Said you're trespassing, building structures without permission, and, get this, she's pushing for a full investigation." I nodded. And the sheriff? Just left. Said he'd keep an eye on things, but she's pushing hard. Seems like she's trying to make this stick. A cold wind swept past, rustling the trees. I knew the real fight was just beginning. Karen wasn't going to give up that easily. She'd have her lawyers, her reports, her army of HOA cronies. But I had something she didn't see coming. I already knew the truth. I pulled out the bundle of deeds from my pocket and laid them flat on the table. The original land titles, scanned and organized. Not just for the cabin, the entire shoreline behind her. The one she was so eager to claim. Every document proved it. This land was mine. Always had been, and she had no idea. I checked my email, nothing yet. But I knew her next move. It was probably already in the works. Some legal letter, some new threat. I didn't want to wait. I had to act fast. I grabbed my phone and opened the drone footage I'd prepared. The latest version, layered with overlays, timestamps, and my own narration. It was powerful, clear, impossible to deny. I uploaded it to a secure server, then sent the link to a trusted neighbor who owed me a favor. I told him to share it with anyone who needed proof. Then I looked up again. The shoreline was quiet now, but I had a bad feeling. Karen wasn't the type to back down. She'd come back, with more people, more lies. I had to be ready. I moved quickly, pulling out the old land maps and the recent survey reports I'd kept hidden. I knew her game. She'd try to twist the facts, claim I'd altered the land, or that I'd built something illegal. But I had the original documents, the old notes from my grandfather, the handwritten letters from the county. They all said the same thing. This land was mine. Suddenly my phone buzzed again. A new email from the HOA. It was a formal notice, an urgent meeting. They wanted to discuss unauthorized development and potential zoning violations. The words sounded familiar, like a script she'd written for them. No time to think. I grabbed the folder of deeds, the drone footage, and a few printed maps. I needed to show them the truth face to face. I headed to the HOA meeting spot, a small, nondescript clubhouse. I arrived early just as the doors opened. Inside, Karen was already there, sitting at the head of the table, her face tight with anger. The room was filled with people I barely knew, some neighbors, some strangers, all there for their own reasons. The meeting started with her reading from her prepared notes, words about community safety and protecting the land. She waved around her photos, trying to make the cabin look suspicious. Then she called for my turn. I stepped forward, unrolled my maps, plugged in my USB. The screen flickered on, and the drone footage began. The room went silent. The aerial view showed the lake, the shoreline, the cabin, entirely outside any HOA lines. The red overlays on. My maps matched the footage perfectly. I narrated softly, pointing out the old deeds, the county's signed documents, the notes from my grandfather. I explained how the shoreline had been legally granted to us decades ago. Some faces in the room shifted. Karen's eyes widened. She tried to interrupt, claiming the footage was edited or deceptive. But I didn't let her. I finished my presentation, then handed the USB to the oldest board member. Quiet settled. No one spoke. Finally, someone said, "This changes everything." Karen's face went pale. She tried to argue, but her voice was weak. The room's silence was her defeat. I didn't stay for the vote. I just turned and left the room, feeling a strange calm. I had shown them the truth. That was all I needed. As I stepped outside into the fresh air, I knew she'd be back, but this time I was ready. And I had the proof to stop her, certainly. Here's the powerful, suspenseful ending. Starting immediately from the previous chapter's conclusion, with simple language, sharp twists, and a mind-blowing finish. I watched her stumble back into her car, her face twisted with rage and disbelief. The engine roared to life and she sped away, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a trail of her fury. I didn't move, just stood there, staring at the empty driveway, knowing this wasn't over. Not yet. My phone buzzed. Mills. I answered quietly, my voice steady. She's gone, I said. But she's already filing complaints. Said I'm trespassing, building illegally, and demanding a full investigation. Figures, Mills replied. She's not stopping. She's got her lawyers, her reports, an army of cronies. But I've got something you need to see. He hesitated. You might want to come by the station. There's something you won't believe. I nodded, already knowing. I grabbed the deed folder from my pocket, the original documents, my grandfather's signatures, the county's stamps, every line of proof that this land was mine. I had the truth. She didn't, and she had no idea what I'd uncovered. I rushed to the county office, heart pounding. The clerk, Colleen, was already waiting, her eyes sharp. You've heard about her, she said softly. She's digging deep, trying to rewrite history. But I've got something for you. She pulled out a set of old, faded land maps. I studied them. They matched the current deeds perfectly, except for one thing. There, hidden in the fine print, was a long-forgotten agreement, a little-known clause from decades ago, an old deed signed by my grandfather himself, granting us the shoreline not to be encroached upon by the HOA. Did you know about this? Colleen asked. I shook my head. No, but I do now. Suddenly my phone buzzed again. Another email. This one from the HOA. An emergency meeting, a plan to seize the land, turn it into a community center, build a dock extension, and erase my rights altogether. I knew what I had to do. I rushed home, prepared the evidence, and headed straight to their meeting. Inside the cramped room, Karen sat at the head of the table, her eyes glittering with false confidence. The other board members looked uneasy. I walked up, unrolling my maps and pulling out my USB. The screen flickered on, revealing drone footage, showing the cabin, the shoreline, the old grant, everything I'd uncovered. I narrated softly, explaining how the deed was signed, sealed, and backed by the county, how the land was mine forever. The room grew silent. Karen's face drained of color. She tried to protest, but her words fizzled out. One of the board members looked at her and then at me, nodding slowly. Finally, the vote was called. An attempt to override the deed, to claim the shoreline for the HOA. But the majority hesitated. One by one, they looked at the evidence, the proof that had been hidden for years. The tide was turning. And then, a twist no one saw coming. The oldest board member, an elderly man who had been quietly listening, stood up. He looked at Karen, then at the maps, then at me. Folks, he said softly, this land belongs to him. It's been in his family long before any of us thought about borders or HOA rules. He paused, then added, and I've just checked the county records again. The old deed. This is the real deal. We're bound by law now. Karen's jaw clenched. Her eyes darted around, searching for a way out. But it was too late. The room erupted in murmurs, some angry, some resigned. The vote was clear. This land stayed with me. As I gathered my papers, I looked at Karen. Her face was a mask of fury and defeat. She stormed out, her footsteps heavy, leaving her dreams of control shattered behind her. I watched her leave, then turned back to the room. And suddenly, the room's lights flickered. The old man reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, faded envelope. Wait, he said. There's one more thing. He handed me the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten, aged, but legible. It was from my grandfather. It read, Son, they will try to take what's yours. Don't let them. Hold your ground. The land remembers those who protect it. A shiver ran down my spine. I looked up. The room was emptying out. The truth had been spoken. The deed was clear, and the land was finally free. But as I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I saw her car parked at the edge of the woods. She was watching from behind the trees, her face unreadable, and then she did something unexpected. She slowly opened her window, leaned out and whispered, This isn't over. I didn't reply. I just smiled. because I knew the real battle had only just begun, and that somehow the land itself had already spoken the final word.